What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Draconic Sports. In today's video, we are going to be giving you guys 5 teams that we think should trade up in this year's NFL draft and 5 teams we think should trade down in this year's NFL draft. And we're going to be going through them one by one, alternating between teams that should trade up and teams that should trade down. And me and Aqua will be giving you guys our thoughts on each and every team and kind of what their strategy could look like going into this draft process, because it is a very interesting draft class and we're really excited to see what goes down on draft night. And make sure to comment down below what you think your favorite team's strategy should be for this year's draft, because it's going to be actually crazy. There's going to be some wild trades that I think are going to go down on draft night. Also, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, because it helps out the channel a ton and we'd really appreciate it. And don't forget to turn on post notifications so you never miss out on a future video, short, or live stream from us here at Draconic Sports. And without further ado, let's just get right into the video.
All right, the first team that we think potentially could trade up in this NFL draft in the first round is the Detroit Lions. Now, the Lions, as people know, is a pretty talented roster, and for that reason, we think the Lions might have desire to trade up earlier in the first round and take a player they feel like could potentially complete their roster. Obviously, talented their roster is, there are a few holes, not many, but there are a few. Guard tends to be eye-popping, and so does edge, and we think it's potentially possible they might want to trade up for take one of the, not quite premier, but one of the better edge rushers in this draft. Players they could take with this pick, if they trade up, potentially they might be favoring Mike Green, maybe a Samar Stewart, or like a Michael Williams. Well, there's a lot of potential players that are likely not going to potentially be there. It's hard to know which one to exactly fall to them. So if they really want to get their pick of their edge rusher they feel like can work really well opposite Hutchinson, they could potentially trade up. Teams that potentially could trade up with, potentially trade with a team that feels like they have a need that's lower in the draft, or a team that might be a little needy more picks. The Lions have shown in the past to willing to trade up and down depending on the year in the draft. Maybe they'll trade someone like a Seattle team. Maybe they'll trade all the way up. Even with even the Bengals, the Cardinals, there's a lot of options of teams they could trade up if they really want to get their edge rusher, or maybe just trade up a little bit, maybe even like the Texans or someone, or even just to jump the Ravens. The Lions definitely have their reasons to eventually be a team to trade up in this year's first round of the draft.
All right, so for our first team that should trade down in this year's NFL draft, we're going to go with the Pittsburgh Steelers, because they're at pick 21, and yeah, it's been a while since Big Ben's retired now, and they have not been able to find a consistent QB to replace him. And this year's NFL draft, everybody's been talking about it, who's better, Shadir Sanders or Cam Ward, and most likely Tennessee's going to take Ward at 1, and Shadir's going to probably fall to some random team within the top 10, so he really could slide anywhere, and we don't think he's going to slide all the way down to 21, obviously, for the Steelers. And there's really not a clear third guy, really. Maybe Jalen Monroe. We think the Steelers are going to end up trading down outside of the first, round and trying to get multiple second-round picks so they can, kind of stuff up on a quarterback, maybe a running back to replace Najee. I don't know, maybe some, D guys, like another safety with Mika Fitzpatrick, or maybe a D lineman because Cameron Hayward's getting older. And so, yeah, there's a lot the Steelers could do in the second round, and we just don't think they have a reason to take somebody in the first round that's clear and obvious, because the clear and obvious hole in that team is a quarterback. Trading down makes the most sense just because they're not going to have a clear number 3 quarterback to draft at 21, and I don't think they want to make the same mistake like they did with Kenny Pickett, taking him kind of with a reach pick in the first round. That's the reason why we think the Steelers are probably going to trade down for this year's draft.
The next team we think that can potentially trade up in this year's draft is the Chicago Bears. Now, the Bears are in an interesting spot with pick 10. Now, a lot of people have mocked them Genty at 10 if the Raiders don't pick Genty, but that's not a certainty. And if they really want Genty that badly, they could just should have jumped the Raiders. There's a lot of options to jump the Raiders, or they eventually could just trade with the Raiders and trade out of them picking Genty for that pick. There is some possibilities here where the Bears could trade up. If they really feel Genty is that piece that's gonna just be absolutely dominant in behind their O-line, which, in my personal opinion, I think they could use a little more help on that O-line, at least in the tackle spot, and maybe some more depth. But regardless, if the Bears feel like that Genty is the piece that will turn their offense into a world beater, then why not make the trade? It's definitely going to cost them a decent amount of capital, but they do actually have an extra second this year from the trade for the first overall pick to the Panthers, so definitely a possibility. Or maybe even the Browns potentially could trade out the second overall pick. Like I said, they have options, and if they want to be aggressive and make a statement for Ben Johnson, this very well could be the decision they make. at pick 10.
All right, so next up for the teams that we think should trade down, we have the New England Patriots, my own team. It's going to be a very interesting draft for the Patriots because this first pick that they have at pick 4 could go many different ways. We could go for a skill guy in Travis Hunter, or we could go for a dominant guy in Abdul Carter. We could go either way, or we could trade down like we think the Patriots have a chance of doing for an offensive lineman later, or maybe a wide receiver later, and have somebody like Matthew Golden, maybe McMillan drops, or somebody, like that we can get in the later rounds. We don't really know who the Patriots would trade with, to be honest. That would be a very much a weird... Well, no, it wouldn't. It would be weird, but it would also be very interesting. I think they would get a lot of calls, definitely, because pick 4, you could get a Hunter or a Carter by the time it comes to you, especially if another team within the first 4 does something weird, what's considered abnormal. So the Patriots probably have a decent shot at trading down, depending on what the first 3 picks do with them, and they're probably gonna have a lot of people that want that 4th overall pick, so they're probably gonna end up taking an offensive lineman or a wide receiver. If I was to guess, I would draft a wide receiver if I was to trade down with the Patriots and get like maybe mid-teens, or I don't know, maybe like late, right outside the top 10, like 11, 12, 13. I would still pick a wide receiver. I don't think I would go offensive lineman. I think the Patriots would most likely want to trade down outside of the 4th pick, draft a wide receiver, and then go O-line in the 2nd round. And I think that would make the most sense. And it wouldn't be that bad of a strategy for the Patriots, considering they usually don't draft wide receivers at all in the 1st round or even in the 2nd round. So the fact that they would trade down, get some assets, and then maybe select a wide receiver that would still, give them a good amount of like leverage with when it comes to like having people that they can call good draft picks, it would make a lot of sense for the team in general. So I think that would be a good strategy for them if they were to trade down. All right, so the next team we think should trade up in this year's NFL draft are the New York Giants, because they already have the 3rd overall pick, which they're probably going to select the person they want, and whoever that is, we have no idea, to be honest, because the Browns could take many different people at the 2nd overall pick, but whoever the Giants select the 3rd overall pick is their choice, but we think they could also make a sneaky run into the 1st round again and trade with one of the later teams in the NFL draft, like the Rams, or maybe like the Chiefs, or maybe, like the Bills. They could trade up, in the later higher 20s and get somebody like, an O lineman, maybe another D lineman, which shouldn't be the number 1 priority, but maybe even a running back, which they don't really need per se, but maybe even a wide receiver to pair with Malik Neighbors. There's a lot of things they could do if they were to trade back into the 1st round with those later picks, and it would be interesting to see. If I was the Giants, I'd probably select an O-lineman. Like if you're going to get, Shedeur, if you're going to get Abdul Carter or Hunter, and with the 3rd pick, you might as well, if you're going to trade, if you want to get greedy and trade back into the 1st round, you might as well get an offensive lineman just to help out. Another strategy the Giants could go for with trading back into the 1st round later is maybe even getting a quarterback and developing them. Kind of like what we were talking about with the Steelers, but not really, because the Steelers are probably not going to want to aggressively take a quarterback in the 1st round. So maybe the Giants do it. Maybe they get Abdul Carter with the 3rd overall pick, and maybe they trade back in and select somebody like Jalen Milroe, and they try to develop them behind Russell Wilson. That also could be a chance the Giants could take. It's a risky one, but it's the New York Giants. Like, they take a lot of risks, especially when it comes to drafting. Just look at them drafting Philip Rivers and then trading for Eli Manning. So, anything could happen. And the Giants are definitely a good example of that. I think it's a decent strategy, and I would be interesting to see the Giants do it.
Next up for our trade down team, we have the Minnesota Vikings trading out of the 1st round. Now, what the Vikings really kind of need, based on the holes in their roster, is help in the secondary, either that's a corner or a safety. Probably a safety, more than like, if I had to guess. And then a running back. Both a safety and a running back should be both available in the 2nd round. They do have a 2nd round pick, but honestly, if they just they could just trade down, maybe even with the Giants we just talked about, trade out of the 1st to get more picks. Because unfortunately, due to their strategy of last year and other seasons, they only actually have 5 draft picks to work with. And one of them is technically not even theirs. It was originally the Texans. So they traded a guard away for. So the Vikings are a bit lacking in picks. So if they want to get guys they can develop for the future and other like smaller needs on the roster, this would be a pretty good thing to do. And like I said, they can probably get that safety or the running back in the 2nd if they wanted to trade down from pick 24.
All right, so next up for teams that should trade up, we have the Houston Texans, who are a very interesting team and remind me a lot of the Bengals a few years ago before they got Chase when they had Burrow and they needed, offensive line because Burrow was coming off of a torn ACL, but they also needed offensive weapons. And so the Texans are at a similar divide, crossroads almost, where they trade away Larry Tunsil, so they need an offensive lineman, but they also lost Diggs and they lost Tank Dell, sadly, to that gruesome injury. So it's really just kind of like what they were doing at the beginning of the season with CJ Stroud only throwing to Nico Collins, and that's all. So it would be helpful if they did get greedy and went for somebody like McMillan, who probably won't actually fall to them. So maybe they go for like Matthew Golden, who I think, in my personal opinion, is the second best wide receiver out of Texas. And so they might have to go for somebody like that later. But, I mean, that's the whole point of trading up. So maybe they do trade up to get McMillan. And maybe they really do think they can pair him with Nico Collins to make that wide receiver duo. But at the end of the day, do the Texans want to prioritize offensive lineman or wide receiver? If they want to prioritize wide receiver, I would suggest trading up. If they want to prioritize offensive lineman, probably stay where you are. I think that'd be a fair assumption. I don't think you're going to trade up for an offensive lineman unless you're getting really greedy and you really need somebody that you think can be generational, which to be honest, like if they want to trade up that high, I don't think they're going to get a generational offensive lineman. So trading up to get McMillan would probably make the most sense. And yeah, maybe they try to steal the Patriots' thunder and draft a really good wide receiver too for Nico Collins.
Next team we have on trade down is the Seattle Seahawks. Now, the Seahawks are in an interesting position in terms of their needs. They retooled the team basically this year, moving on from Geno, moving on from Metcalf, which has given them a lot of trade capital from both of those trades. But the weird thing is that their needs are kind of more at like lower valued positions, people call it. Like they need a new center and they need new guards. And they're currently sitting at pick 18, so they want to pick. They could pick a guard there, but I feel like they could trade down a bit, still get the guy they want. So I think there's a decent possibility that the Seahawks, with this new retooling kind of like rebuilding year, they could trade down and then use that further draft capital to help address more of those needs. Maybe even just taking multiple interior offensive linemen within their first few picks. Like that's definitely a possibility. And I think Seattle has a good reason to potentially trade down. Definitely more to trade down than trade up, at least.
All right, and last but certainly not least, for the teams that we think should trade up, we have, which might be a surprise to some of you, the Philadelphia Eagles, who had a very interesting offseason, letting a lot of players go and not gaining that many back. And, not gaining nearly as many as they lost, at least. So, I mean, they got rid of, most of the guys that kind of did help them on the defensive side to get to the Super Bowl in the first place, including Josh Sweat. And so they do need a defensive guy. They need somebody that can come in and make a difference as a rookie. And so do they trade up for Travis Hunter? Probably not. Do they trade up for Abdul Carter? Probably not. But they are at the last pick in the draft, so maybe they could sneak in there and get a defensive guy that they think is underrated. Maybe they go like late teens, maybe early teens, maybe just middle of the pack of the draft and just try to select somebody that could be, an underdog that they think they could develop and just, put aside Cooper DeJean and other guys on that team that are on the younger side and, make this defense last longer than the last one, or last longer than the last two they've had for the Super Bowl wins, which those defenses really did kind of just, fall apart after the Super Bowl because everybody was kind of getting old. So hopefully they could trade up and get somebody on the younger side to help out with these defensive departures and overall just make their team younger and hopefully last longer when it comes to Super Bowl champion dynasty windows. Which I think the Eagles could maybe do for another year or two before they really have to retool the team. So hopefully their draft pick this year, they will trade up and hopefully they will draft somebody that will make this team last a longer time than people think when it comes to Super Bowl championship contending window.
All right, for the final team we have in trade down is the Cleveland Browns. So the Browns are, obviously everyone knows, in a really weird spot with their current QB situation. And as people have said time and time in this draft, QB probably isn't quite worth the second overall pick. And then anything beyond that is even worse. So addressing QB is not something you can really do in this draft, unless you're the Titans, who are not moving out of that pick. This team probably honestly has a lot of needs. They have aging corners, they have aging tackles. They honestly probably need another wide receiver. And honestly, they probably need a new running back since it doesn't seem that Chubb will ever be getting back to its old form, unfortunately. So this team has a lot of needs, and they have a very valuable pick in this draft. If you don't need a QB, there's some good receivers, there's good edge rushers, there's good offensive tackles you could draft to this point. So with that all being stated, the Browns have a potentially could trade out of this pick for a decent amount of draft capital. There are teams potentially like the Panthers at pick 8 that could really love the idea of drafting a dual Carter, and you could still get yourself a pretty good talent. They could trade down with a team that really wants a dual Carter even. Carter is considered a generational talent. Maybe the Patriots want to secure him for certain. They could even potentially make a little move up. That is a possibility. Maybe you could threaten the Giants by saying you're going to take Travis Hunter or a dual card, depending which one they prefer, and basically force them to trade down just to get some extra draft capital while still taking one of them. Like, there's possibilities for the Browns. They can go really far down, even if they really want a lot of potential draft capital. But I think this team needs it because they just don't have what it takes to win in their current state. I really think the Browns could very well do a lot with that draft capital, which could make sense to trade out a second overall pick in a year where they can't get the QB of the future.
Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe again like we already stated earlier in the video if you haven't already, and if you enjoy the content we're making over here at Draconic Sports, because don't worry, we'll have more content like this in the future after the draft, going into the off season, also going into playoff season for other sports like the NHL and the NBA, so make sure to stay tuned for those. And also make sure to join our Discord server, link in the description, for daily discussions, polls, content like that, with other sports fans like yourselves. And also make sure to stay happy, make sure to keep a smile on your face, and have a great rest of your guys' week. We'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.
Goodbye.